Hello and welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, and today I have a bit of a thought exercise for you. Obviously, Lenovo is a large company. It has a lot of different brands, and you have to imagine that with R&D in some of the same buildings, engineers are going to talk, people are going to see other people's projects, and ideas might get swapped around. And I can't help but feel that the people that were working on the Yoga and the people that were working on the X1 tablet must have bumped in the hall at some point, because we have this machine here, the Lenovo MIIX 520. And I know that there's an extra I in there, and the internet seems to be divided on how to pronounce it, so we're just going to go with MIIX for today. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice is obviously this is a Surface-style tablet. The second thing you're going to notice is the watch band hinge that was made infamous on the Yoga line is present here. So what that means is that you get this incredibly well-engineered and rather smart-looking tablet that's a 12-inch form factor that is very reminiscent of what the X1 tablet was doing, but is very distinctly not an X1 tablet. It does have that hinge that goes down all the way to 160 degrees, so not quite as far as, say, the X1 tablet 3rd generation, which I featured on the channel. You can see a video about it up here. And we've got a 12.2 inch 1920 by 1200 16 by 10 300 nit IPS display. So for those of you that are enjoying the renaissance of the 16 by 10 displays, this is all ready to go for you. You don't need to worry about it being a couple of years old or behind the times. Now, this is an interesting device because there were 3 generations of CPU that were available. They were available in the 6th generation Intel, the 7th generation Intel, and the 8th generation Intel. And I'm just going to put them up on the screen because there are too many to list. And depending on which generation, you had an integrated GPU to match. Now, because of this, there is a massive range of CPUs, both in terms of strength as well as generation. So that means that the 39 watt-hour battery in here is going to be challenged dramatically differently depending on what CPU you have in there. RAM was 16 gigs, 2133 megahertz, DDR4, and of course is soldered to the board. And storage was an M.2 PCIe 3.0 by 4 SSD. And you have all of the regular accoutrement Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.1. Some of these models had LTE capability. Realistically, if the X1 tablet is just a bit too pricey, then this has a lot of the same features, and in fact has some that one you might think are apps. A few other things to note is we do have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera as well as a 5 or 8 megapixel rear-facing camera, depending on what you got at the factory. And the 8 megapixel camera was capable of some augmented reality, 3D scanning stuff they put in the marketing. I'm not too sure how you would tell the difference without just looking at the serial number and reading the spec sheet. So we can see on the inside here, if the sticker is to be believed, that this is the 8th generation Core i7. So that is the top of the line 8550U, which is the same CPU that's in the higher end Surface Book 2, which that's a lot of tech to be cramming into this. Speaking of cramming into it, let's talk about ports and other features. We do have a micro SD card slot right here underneath the kickstand for additional storage, which I love the sound that click makes. That is like high-end European sedan click. Lovely. On this side over here, we have USB Type-C, USB-A 3.0, a barrel plug charging port, and then on the other side, we have power, volume rocker, headphone microphone combo jack, and then the fingerprint reader is right there. So while you don't have 2 of any port, you do have a little bit more connectivity out of the box depending on what your needs are compared against the X1 tablet. It is also worth pointing out that this keyboard here is detachable, standard pogo pin, and is illuminated. So that is a nice feature that comes standard with these as well. And I just cannot get enough of how that closes. Now, one really cool feature about this that I discovered actually when I was just messing around with it is there is no charge indicator anywhere on the device. However, if I take my power supply here and plug it in, this is obviously not the original power supply, but it's the one I have available. if you plug it in and you open up the tablet here, it shows you how much power is in it, which I think is really cool. So with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I won't be taking this apart on the channel today, simply because this is already going to a new home and tablets can be a bit tricky. But let's go ahead and see how quickly this powers up. I'll just make sure that the studio lights aren't blaring in the screen. There we go. And while that is booting up, I should mention that it also features Active Pen support. So that's Active Pen 1 and Active Pen 2. And that's fast. And if we listen carefully, active cooling with a fan. So that's one thing that the Surface Book 2, depending on the configuration you bought it in, doesn't even have. So this one only has 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is a bit too bad, especially for a i7. It would have been nicer to see 16. But that's really just a small nitpick. This is a beautiful device. It's incredibly responsive. Again, your N-Trig pens are probably all going to work, not just these. It's just a really beautiful, compact, and nice little device. You've got great cameras that are built into this thing. So if you want something that's got higher end or higher fidelity cameras than your standard laptop fare, this is definitely going to be it. They work great. Touch works great. It's a nice device. And even though it isn't necessarily a ThinkPad, let's be honest with ourselves, you can definitely see the ThinkPad DNA that must have crossed the hall at some point at Lenovo R&D. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the quick look at this device. As you can imagine, prices on these things used are going to vary quite wildly just because of all the different CPU configurations that are available. You can probably get them as low as around 400 Canadian dollars, but then they can climb pretty quickly from there depending on how they're configured, because 8th generation Intel, obviously, great candidate for Windows 11. And even though this might have bezels that are larger than some other devices out there, I've always appreciated it because that means that I don't need to be as careful on where I put my thumb when I'm grabbing the device. Having that perch all the way around means that when you're holding it, you don't need to worry about accidentally touching the screen. So if you've enjoyed this sort of content and would like to see more, I am going to encourage you to do the big four. Please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, so the next time I feature a tablet computer like this one, you will be the first to know about it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.